Hello there, my name is Nathan, and welcome to my video coursework project. So let's first take a look at our labor consumption model. We're going to be modeling consumption as being equal to WT minus WN, where W is the real wage. And at the point A, which is shown on the graph on the left, the worker is optimizing between leisure and consumption, and their MRS is equal to W, their real wage. Do you note that no income tax is being modeled here in this slide? Let's introduce our progressive tax rate system. In our tax-free world, consumption is given by C is equal to WT minus WN, but now we are implementing a tax rate of X%. So consumption now is equal to 1 minus X times WT minus 1 minus X times WN. And this changes the slope of our budget line. So if we look at the tax-free threshold, which is below S, consumption is still equal to WT minus WN. So the gradient of the budget line is still equal to negative N. However, after implementing our tax rate, the gradient of the budget line decreases because it's being multiplied by that 1 minus X term, where X is in between 0 and 1. So this flattens out our gradient line. This is important because now, if you are a higher income earner who is being taxed at X%, you are earning less from each hour of work that you put in as compared to a worker under the tax-free threshold because they have a steeper budget line. Let's understand the substitution and income effects that are present here as well. So let's say initially we are in a free tax world and our worker is at point A, right? Because the gradient of this line is negative W. But let's say that, as we just showed in our previous model, there's an X% tax rate, so the gradient of the budget line decreases. The net effect is shown by the worker going from A to B. But this effect is comprised of the substitution and the income effect. Because this worker faces an income tax, the real wage decreases, meaning that the price of leisure is now cheaper. Because leisure is a normal good, they are going to substitute time spent on labor for more time spent on leisure. This is going to reduce their total labor output, meaning that they work less. But also, the income effect happens after this. Because they're working less and because their real wage is less, the worker is effectively poorer. So they can't afford as much of their income on consumption. So they're going to work more. But overall, the substitution effect dominates. So the net effect from A to B is that the worker works less under this progressive tax rate system. Now let's look at our proposed flat tax rate system at Y%, which is going to be less than X%. Now, this flat tax rate states that regardless of how much our worker is making an income, they're going to be taxed at Y%. So there's no kink in our new budget line, which is this light blue budget line right here. Also note that with a flat tax rate, an hour of labor provides more compared to an hour of labor after the threshold for the progressive tax. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at our incentives to work or disincentives to not work. So if I'm a high income earner under our flat tax rate regime, I'm going to have more of incentive to work because I'm facing a less steep tax rate. So less of my income is going to be taxed, right? So I earn more consumption based off of my labor. However, under a progressive tax rate system, there's more of a disincentive to not work. Sorry, a disincentive to work because I know that a lot of my income will be taxed. Under a flat tax rate system, what we will observe is that high income earners will want to work more, while low income earners will want to work less. Low income earners will want to work less because they're going from being taxed at 0% to being taxed at Y%. So as we just saw with the substitution and income effect, they are going to essentially substitute time spent on labor for more time spent on leisure as a whole. Also, what's important to note is that under a progressive tax rate, there is an incentive to earn below the threshold of being taxed. Right? If I'm earning a low income, I may want to stay just below the point of being taxed because I can keep all my income as opposed to earning just a bit more and having to pay off more of my income as a tax. Now, this means that there are winners and losers of our proposed flat tax rate. So, in a study done by Andreas Piglici, where he observed the economic effects of post-Soviet countries implementing flat tax rate systems, he discovered that these countries experienced economic and efficiency gains. However, in another study he did along with Paulus in 2009, where they ran simulations on flat tax implementations for Western European countries, they discovered that while, yes, these countries did experience increases in labor supply incentives, as shown by the diagram on the left, they also experienced increases in inequality and poverty, as well as polarization. This suggests that there's a trade-off between equality and efficiency when implementing a uh, flat tax rate system because we are removing this tax-free threshold, right? So it's going to affect our low income earners more because now more of their income is being taxed and they didn't have a whole lot of income to begin with in the first place. There's also going to be a reduction in social benefits from these lower taxes, which explains why many of these countries experienced greater levels of inequality and poverty. All right, now on to topic two. Let's look at Reagan's tax cuts in the mid 1980s. So the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981 was the largest tax cut in US history. It cut the highest income tax bracket from 70% to 50%, as well as cutting the bottom bracket from 14% to 11%. The bill was inspired by supply side economics, which is this theoretical idea that kind of drove it was the economic intuition behind the policy. What this is saying is that by cutting taxes on the wealthy, this is going to trickle down to average citizens through job growth and increased consumer spending, which is going to lead to the economy booming as a whole, which is going to feed into this positive feedback loop of increased tax revenue. Now, if we look at the visual representation on the left, we see the trickle-down effect. It has this pyramid structure where at the top, the rich are gaining more wealth due to these tax cuts, and theoretically, they're going to use that increased wealth to invest, spend more, and this is going to hopefully benefit those on the lower tiers of our pyramid. And on the right, we're kind of showing this positive feedback loop that the supply side economics theorists believed in the time, where lower taxes and regulation would lead to greater economic incentives, which would also lead to increased investment and productivity. It's kind of flowing back and forth through the cycle. But the effects were quite different. So initially, after the tax cut, the economy actually stagnated. There was static business investment, high unemployment, and national debt tripled to $2.6 billion dollars. And the supply side theories were only partially true. While, yes, we did see lower rates of tax avoidance amongst high earners, as well as an increase in the labor supply as a whole, much of this growth was quite minimal after the initial stagnation. And a 2012 congressional report also revealed that these cuts probably had little effects on any forms of productivity or any types of economic efficiencies that were seen after the cuts. And the biggest point is that these tax cuts actually increased economic inequality. So its effects are quite mixed, and there remains today a differing view of opinions on the ultimate effect of these tax cuts. Well, thank you very much, and yeah.